Thanks for tuning in to the Netflix and Kill podcast. I had the opportunity to interview the amazingly talented cinephile slash filmmaker Calvo. There is a spoiler in regards to Sweet Sweet Lonely Girl in the interview around the 20 plus minute mark. I put the exact location in the description, so just make sure to skip that part if you do listen to the interview and you haven't seen Sweet Sweet Lonely Girl. But besides that, I hope you enjoy the interview. Thank you, AD Calvo, for letting me interview you, and I hope you continue to prosper. So the first question here is, how do you define horror? What criteria must be met for you to consider a film horror?
That's horror to me is just, usually stuff that's dark. For me, the criteria would be, is it dark, and is there some kind of death involved some way, whether it's even if it's in tone or doesn't have to have necessarily gore, and that's something I've shied away from. I've tried not to be too graphic in my films. So I think it's just a tone that's an overall dark tone, So like take a movie like Peter Jackson's Heavenly Creatures, which is a film I really like. Most people wouldn't consider that a horror film, but to me, I kind of think of those kind of films as horror too, not just about monsters and creatures and supernatural. Those obviously kind of tip the scales to horror, but I'd like to expand, widen the net a little bit to include films that are just more psychological thrillers and dark kind of films.
Awesome. Okay. And
let me know if I ramble or if you want more from, I never know when to shut up or if you need more, if you're looking for something else, just jump in.
No, you're totally fine. Yeah. My main thing is I don't want to jump in while you're answering, because for sure it's an awesome answer. All right. So when you do watch horror films, I mean, is there a reason you do watch horror films? Is it the catharsis, to feel sympathy for the other, the special effects, nostalgia?
So that's a tricky question, because like I'm 50 years old now, and the reason I watch horror films now and the types of horror films I watch now are very different from the types of films I watched when I was in my 20s, say, or today. I have a hard time watching horror films, mainly because I'm never quite satisfied. I rarely find the thing that turns me on is more atmosphere and kind of just the tonality of dread, without explicit things being too explicit. And that's become a challenge. So sometimes I find myself watching older films from the 70s. In that era. And occasionally something comes along that piques my interest. Like I was kind of hoping, I didn't go see Winchester,
Okay.
that Helen Mirren movie that's out now. And unfortunately, I got all excited about it from watching the trailer. It was like, it just seemed like a cool, gothic, atmospheric film. From the trailer, and then the reviews weren't exactly stellar, so I shied away from it. But I'm more looking for films like that. Like I really enjoyed, in terms of films like that, big tentpole horror films. I enjoyed Woman in Black. That was kind of very atmospheric and haunting. so yeah, it's I have a hard time sometimes, really. It's not the only thing I sit down and watch these days either, So
Exactly.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, I mean, and you were sort of starting to get into another question I was going to ask was your preferred horror subgenres. So you mentioned the gothic and that atmospheric. I mean, is there? I put down, like there's I mean, I'm assuming you don't like body horror, or you're more so into the supernatural, right?
yeah, I like supernatural. I like haunting, foreboding kind of films that. When I say gothic, I think of I think of solitude and the potential for horror more than actual horror. I just had a conversation today with my wife. We were talking about ghost stories, and we were trying to just make a list of things we like to see in ghost stories, and we thought about films like Flowers in the Attic, for example, where you don't explicitly have supernatural things, but they have that kind of that same tone is there. So when you find a film like that, it's when I find a film like that, it's really a nice treat. There was a film from a few years back that was kind of unexpected. I knew it was a ghost story, but I ended up really liking it a lot more than it was kind of a surprise. A film called Awakenings. It takes place in a boys' school, and that was kind of a cool surprise. But in terms of subgenres, yeah, I would say supernatural, haunting type films, haunted house type subgenre.
All right. Awesome. Okay. And I guess we're kind of sort of off topic here, but are are you a physical media collector at all? Do you collect like Blu-rays or VHS, anything like that, or?
Um, I don't, because I feel like I can get everything online pretty much. So and we recently downsized, and it's like I don't have a lot of space where we're living, so I actually just went through this big cleansing, threw out a lot of old stuff, and I within the last year, and that was kind of in some ways a hard thing to do, but at the same time it was kind of liberating too. So uh, I sometimes I'll go into someone's house and they're like a collector of things, and I'm totally jealous of that, because it's like so cool to see that kind of stuff. But I haven't done that so much.
Oh, okay. I'm on the same boat. All right. So in terms, your preferred, I guess you kind of went to your preferred aesthetics when it comes to horror films, but I mean, do you prefer like practical effects over CGI, color over monochrome, anything like that?
Yeah, I like, I think that having practical is great, and then you can enhance it a little bit with CGI. I think that tends to look, look the best. It all comes down to the what you're trying to do, and what your budget is, and what your skill set or your team's skill set is. So it's really each and every project is kind of, for me at least, it's been a different kind of thing. I mean, I just watched if you watch Shudder,
Yeah.
they have that series, The Core.
Yes.
I binged that, and I loved it, and I really enjoyed watching like all the SFX stuff that they would do and throughout the show. I've never had those kind of like really elaborate kind of SFX moments in my films. With the exception of my first film, this is kind of a cool little bit of trivia. So my first film, I found this kid from the Netherlands online, and he had done some SFX work on Pan's Labyrinth.
Wow.
for Guillermo. He designed the guy with the eyes in the hand. His name's Pale Man. So
Yes.
really cool design. And I reached out to him, and he was looking to come to the States to do more work here in the States. And I flew him out, and he worked on my first film. And he's up for the Oscar this year for his work on a film called Wonder, about a little boy with a deformity, a deformed face. And he did all the makeup, SFX design work and application.
Wow.
So it's really cool to see Arjen, that's how his name's pronounced, Arjen Tooten, be nominated this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love SFX, and I love watching everything about that stuff, and I'm in awe of it. So I had this amazing SFX kit on my first film, and I really didn't, as I look back, I really didn't know what I was doing on my first film, or in terms of how to utilize that kind of stuff effectively. So I totally underutilized him. And I look back on that like I should have just filmed the stuff he did. That was like the coolest stuff. But anyway, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we can get to your films, because I had like one question per each film, and I guess so. To get to that first film, you were talking about The Other Side of the Tracks, or The Haunting of Amelia.
Yeah.
Okay.
My name was Other Side of the Tracks. They renamed, the domestic distributor renamed it Haunting of Amelia, and I hate that title.
Yeah.
I don't. So these were live and learn.
Yes. So I watched it on Amazon Prime, and it surprised me because I was watching it, and like visually I wasn't. It was to where, like, man, I cried at the end. I'm like, oh, I teared up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's like it's a very slow film, and I wanted to do a bittersweet ghost story.
Yeah.
And the script is kind of a mess, and there's some subplots in there that shouldn't be in there. And it's funny you bring that up, because I within the last 2 years I've recut the film.
Oh, wow.
Because I've seen it so many times, and there's a lot of moments that I do not like. And they're kind of painful for me to watch. And I didn't want to have the film be like that as I got older. I wanted someday to be able to look back on it and kind of enjoy the full watch. So I cut it down. I did a straight edit on the master, and it went from 5 minutes or whatever it is to 58 minutes.
Wow.
So I have a cut that I can show and watch and kind of, and get through it and be like, this is kind of cool, or I'm pretty happy with it. You can never do anything these days with a 58-minute movie, but I did it mostly for myself.
Yeah. Like I said, the story was like beautiful. I was like, damn. Like at the end of it, I was like, wow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it was quite a challenge at the time. We shot it in the summer of 2007, and there weren't a lot of digital films being made at the time. It was like still a time where you'd tell people, I'm shooting a film using digital, a digital camera, and they'd kind of tell you, you can't make a real movie digitally. It was kind of shunned upon. And this is long before DSLRs or cell phone videos. And there were a handful of digital films out there, like big ones come to mind was a film with Macaulay Culkin, I think, was in a Tadpole. Do you remember that film?
No.
And then like Monsoon Wedding. These were all notable first digital features. So I used like an ENG camera to film The Other Side of the Tracks. It was, I think it was called a Vericam, a Panasonic Vericam, and it recorded to tape, but it was all it was a digital camera.
All right. Well, I guess the question I had for that film, because this is a weird thing, but I saw that Michael Bolton was one of the producers of the film.
That is funny. There's a lot of weird stuff about that film. Michael Bolton lives in Connecticut, where I live.
Okay.
And I had shot some short films with a little DVX 100. I was just kind of playing around with the camera, and I posted some stuff on, I don't even remember. It might have been YouTube, or it was, back in 2005. So I think it was YouTube. It might have been something else. But one way or another, he had been working with a screenwriter, this woman named Cindy. I can't remember her last name. And she came across a short film I had done and liked the way it looked. And they were trying to do a film at a low budget. And again, there wasn't a lot of digital filmmaking at the time. So she approached me, and I met him through her. His project was really cool. It was kind of autobiographical.
Oh, wow.
But it was something that was still going to need a couple $1 million to make. And I was just hoping to just shoot like a mumblecore, no budget film. So I wasn't, the timing wasn't right. But then I kind of was able to get this little one off the ground, the other side of the tracks. Because I was still in contact with him, I asked him if he would be an executive producer in name only. So meaning he didn't have to do anything except, put his name on it to support me.
Oh, wow.
As a filmmaker. And he said yes, and we gave him some back end points or something like that. I can't even remember, but it was super helpful, to kind of at the time to have that. And then I kept in touch with him too. We met a few more times after that. Haven't spoken with him for a long time. And then the other interesting connection to Michael is that my composer, Joe Carano, who has scored all my films, right out of high school, Joe toured with Michael Bolton.
What?
Yeah, he was his keyboard engineer. So Joe, and he would do some sequencing stuff. He wasn't the onstage keyboardist. The onstage keyboardist, I think, was a guy named Joey Melody, who played with Barry Manilow. So Michael Bolton knows Joe Carano too. So it's kind of a weird kind of connection. I would see him, occasionally in Milford when I was in high school, or at Sally's Pizza in New Haven. So I was always a fan. I thought he had some cool music at the time, and so it was kind of interesting that we kind of hooked up that way later.
Yeah, for your first film.
Right? Yeah, but like I said, it was a little easier then because there wasn't a lot of stuff being made. Now it's kind of a whole different thing. When I say a lot of digital films, very low budget digital stuff.
For sure. All right. And then you kind of, we kind of talked about the melancholy fantastic, but you've this new edited version, you've screened it, right? At certain festivals now, or?
Yeah. So I've also gotten it released in the UK.
Mm-hmm. I saw that.
So it is available in the UK, and it's a much stronger film, I think, compared to its original cut. And I'm happy I went back and did that. The film was, getting to that film, to make a long story short, right after Other Side of the Tracks, I got attached to direct a film that was going to have like a $2-3 million budget or something like that.
Wow.
And I spent a year on this thing working on it without any pay on the screenplay. And then in October 2008, Lehman Brothers collapse happened, the financial collapse.
Yeah.
Everything went away, all possibility of making this film went away. And I didn't really, I had just spent a year on this, and I was thought that was going to go, and it didn't. So I went and I wrote, I wanted to write something very small, that I knew I could shoot at a very low budget. So this, I wrote Melancholy Fantastic, and it featured this girl, Amy Crowdis, who we met on my first film. She was a stand-in on my first film, and but she had this very kind of haunting kind of look that the camera liked, and she was in Connecticut, and she was eager to do a feature, and so I kind of wrote it with her in mind, and I had this idea of putting her with a life-size doll, this creepy doll, that and having her talk to the doll and having the doll talk back to her. I thought, I was inspired by the Anthony Hopkins film Magic in the
Nice.
70s. And that's so, I mean, it's a very different story, but you can see that, where the talking to the doll and having it comes from. But yeah, so the recut is renamed. We came up with a name for the UK market called Doll in the Dark. But it's in many ways it's the same film, but it's got like it works in a different way, I think. And I just wasn't able to see these kind of these editorial needs at the time. It takes me a while, like to really kind of understand something and time and kind of repeat viewings and really kind of give you new eyes on stuff, if that makes any sense.
For sure. All right. And in terms of, and then you made from there, you made was it House of Dust first or the Midnight Game first?
I did House of Dust and Midnight Game together within the same 2-year period.
Mm-hmm.
Those I didn't write, though. So what happened is Melancholy Fantastic had kind of a soft kind of release. It wasn't, by no means was, really was an unknown release. And then I started questioning. I wasn't thrilled with the way, despite my first film being picked up by Showtime, as I looked at it, it wasn't quite the film that I had hoped to make. So I was starting to question my writing in general. And so I pitched some ideas to some screenwriters and had them write me a script for House of Dust based on a draft screenplay I had done. I had them do a full rewrite on it, and then with the Midnight Game, that was based on a creepypasta story of the same name, and we had a writer write the screenplay for that too, and that presented new challenges and new, in the sense that I realized in some ways it was easier to direct my own writing because I knew exactly what my intention was, and it was a little bit harder for me to kind of, at least with the scripts I had, to connect with the material in the same, intuitive way that I felt with my own writing. You can kind of read your own handwriting, and sometimes it's hard, no matter how bad it is. It's kind of like that. So it was, and then those two films got released by Anchor Bay. They kind of got picked up as in together, and they were both released on DVD in the U.S. and Canada.
All right. Yeah. So I think I listened to an interview and you mentioned about the idea of like a recursion because you were a software engineer. So what I wanted to get at, because I know in House of Dust, with the end going, there's sort of that recursion there, and then Midnight Game, the recursion there, and then now with your Missing Girl and Sweet Sweet 2, that whole idea of the recursion. I mean, is that something that you feel is going to always be present in your writing now, or is
it's interesting. I've never had anyone point it out to me. I think I mentioned that in some interview or something you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I talking about maybe like with the Midnight Game in particular, like with the doppelgangers and the ending, the way the ending kind of loops around again, like it all starts again.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I know that's interesting. I do like, that kind of circularity. Uh, and I just working on a script and I'm pretty much done with it. And it kind of has that same thing at the end, where there are moments that feel like they're repeating throughout the story, but in a different context. And then so that must be something. Yeah. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just kind of subconscious, I guess. But
Getting to sweet here. So I'm this kind of, because I watched interviews too, so there's things you've already mentioned, but you mentioned the poster's a nod to the little girl who lives down the lane, that
yeah,
poster. All right. And then in terms of the music, the sound design, there's like some music reminiscent of the Carrie theme, and there's the use of the synth that was used in Blade Runner, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yep, the Yamaha CS80.
Okay.
It's funny. My Joe just sent me a clip because he has a. I can't remember actually now. I don't want to say something that's not true. He has a bunch of old synths. I don't know if he has a CS80, but he might. But he recently sent me some stuff that was like very Blade Runner, because he's been cleaning up, taking the old synths and kind of bringing them back to life, because they're all from the 80s, and the capacitors go, and the all the electronics need to kind of be tuned up every once in a while. Anyway, let me what you were saying.
All right. No, I just wanted to make sure that's all true or whatnot. And then, all right. So in terms of the sweet story, there's scenes with the pomegranate,
Mm-hmm.
and I was trying to research like what that's like associated with, and the only thing when it comes to Google, the I guess the association was with Zeus's daughter, Persephone or something like that. Was that an inspiration for Beth or anything like that, or are you able to?
Well, I knew I wanted to feature a fruit, and it is the fruit of the dead. I think it's referred to, right? It's an odd fruit, and it's very kind of bloody. And I thought I liked it from the visual, for its visual aspects. But
Yes.
that whole scene about the fruit really comes from. There's a Robert Altman film I really loved with these two women, Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek.
Yes.
And the film is called Three Women, I think.
Yeah, I just watched it.
Yeah, did you like it?
Oh, I loved it. It was.
Yeah,
It was unsettling at
totally.
point. And anyways, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, so that's kind of like going back to your first question about like that's kind of a horror film in some ways, right? It's kind of a. But anyway, if you recall, there's this whole strawberry. I think it was strawberries. I think the Shelley Duvall character eats strawberries, and Sissy Spacek tries to emulate her and ends up telling somebody that she likes strawberries. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I recall that kind of stayed with me. So I wanted to have this kind of fruit that Adele, sees Beth at the grocery store holding a pomegranate, and then later, to impress her, she buys some to kind of mirror her behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, when she invites Beth into the house, as a way to kind of impress Beth, to show her that they have things in common with one another. She's like, "I just bought some pomegranates. Do you want one?" So that's kind of where the origin of that comes from. So, and I thought that was cool that it was also the fruit of the dead.
Oh, that's interesting. All right. So, well, I mean, I don't know if it's just the nerdy side. I mean, like, are you or I'm kind of dumb in terms of trying to figure out, is like Beth, is she, because I thought she was like a witch, and then I was reading reviews that she may be a vampire, but then again, maybe it's not even that. I don't know if it's, are you able to get into the specifics of that, or would you rather not let it be ambiguous?
I'm actually working on so the script I've been working on is actually a sequel to Sweet Sweet Lonely Girl, and so I think of Beth as a ghost kind of devil kind of character, um, not really a vampire, but more like this entity that's timeless and encourages evil in people in very subtle ways. Um, so it's kind of this amalgam of a ghost and a demon kind of thing, and I bring that back in the sequel for sure.
Awesome. That's beautiful to hear that there's going to be, or the story's going to, I guess, somewhat continue or expand. But
yeah, there's a lot to it, that they didn't come, that I feel like I can, that I want to continue to explore. And the new one takes place a few years later, in the early '80s.
nice. All right. Well, let me, because there was also influences, or how do I say it? I don't know. Yeah, I guess influences or that I heard an interview. So Black Sabbath, which you mentioned, was sort of the inspiration, the one piece from that film, The Drop of Water, correct?
Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
That was like the scariest image, for me as a child, watching that late night. They would play it on Channel 11, or I don't remember what channel, PIX, or one of these New York networks would show it. And I always remember that segment with the old woman and the dripping water, and it always stayed with me. And for many years, I didn't know what the film was because I lost the film. That's happened to me with a few films. There were these moments in my mind as a child that really haunted me, and then later, as an adult, luckily was able to rediscover them. And Drop of Water was one, and another one that happened with was Don't Look in the Basement, and which scared the hell out of me. But for some reason, I didn't know the name. I couldn't remember the name of it, and I had. I was glad to rediscover that one. And there's still another one that I have memories of, which I have not been able to find, and I'm still on the hunt for. And I thought it was Burn Witch Burn, but it wasn't. So there's this old black and white film with a witch that scared the hell out of me. And I have very few little images of it in my head, but they were terrifying. And it's not enough for me to be able to describe it really to anybody, or be able to Google and find the thing. So I don't. I hope to find that one someday.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. And then there was Burnt Offerings too that you mentioned was sort of like a reference or whatnot, or.
Yeah. Oh, I love that Dan Curtis film. Yeah, I watched it numerous times as a kid, and then again as an adult, and it's just got such an incredible cast, with Betty Davis and oh man, what's the guy's name? The British actor. I gotta Google it. But anyway, the cast is incredible. Burgess Meredith, and this idea of this house that kind of needs this human kind of sentinel kind of person in the attic. I like the Sentinel too. Did you ever see that film from the 70s?
No.
It actually didn't. I don't think it was very well respected, but I loved it as a kid, and I've since rewatched it and still think it's creepy. It's got some really creepy moments, and that's about it. It's kind of like that, and Burnt Offerings kind of are very similar in the sense that they're the idea of these buildings that are portals and require a sentinel, a human sentinel, to kind of keep them alive or open. And I'm kind of revisiting that very idea in the sequel to Sweet Sweet Lonely Girl. So
that's awesome. All right, and the next, and it's something you already mentioned, was Heavenly Creatures, which I watched last night, and that was amazing. That was the Peter Jackson film.
Yeah. That one is crazy good. I love that film. Could be my favorite film of his.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah. So the two women, again, the two girls, one influencing the other in very negative ways and leading to someone's death. That is very much woven into Sweet Sweet Lonely Girl.
Yeah, and then you mentioned too, My Summer of Love. That was also fantastic.
Yeah, the Emily Blunt film. I think it might have been her breakout film. I don't know if it was her first film. Maybe she did something else, but I think that's the one where we really kind of we all kind of her breakout film.
Yeah,
and it's really beautiful. A really beautiful film. I'm trying to remember the director's name now. My Summer of Love. Do you remember by any chance?
It's Paul.
Oh, yeah. Pawlikowski. I just love his stuff. Did you see Ida?
No.
He has a black and white film about this girl who's a nun right after the Holocaust, and she finds out that she had Jewish parents, and she goes on this pilgrimage to find them, and it's really just so haunting. It's one of the most beautiful films that I've seen. So yeah, I'm just something about his stuff really resonates with me. So yeah, I loved My Summer of Love, and Ida's definitely worth checking out if you liked that film.
For sure. All right, and then the other one you mentioned was Ingmar Bergman's Persona.
Yeah. That one is very interesting. I like his films. They're a little harder to digest
for sure.
The interesting thing, the main reason I bring that up, because that's one of the first female doubling kind of stories. He kind of he laid the groundwork for that. For all these other films we're talking about, so it's kind of like the granddaddy of films like Three Women and that kind of thing.
All right, and then we already
and there's this very sorry to interrupt you, but there's that very explicit sexual story on the beach that takes place in Persona between the two women, and that is kind of, in many ways, there's an homage to that in Sweet Sweet Lonely Girl, on the beach by the lake.
Got it. All right. Yeah, you're talking about when she's kind of talking about her, like, the orgy sequence she had?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right.
That's that moment there.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then we already kind of talked about Three Women, which I just finished watching, was definitely unsettling. And The Match Factory Girl was another that I heard.
Oh, yeah, that one is amazing. That is such a great film. If you haven't seen that, check that out. That is another film that's like, I consider horror, but it doesn't fall into the canon of traditional horror, but is a amazing film. That is got some great visuals, and is a very quiet film. Very little is said in that film.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So yes, I mean, yeah. So I watched. I didn't get to see Burnt Offerings, but I saw all the other ones, and they were all either extremely unsettling or. Two last questions here. What are some of your if you listen to podcasts, some of your favorite genre-centric or film-centric podcasts that you listen to, if you...
Yeah, what Shockwaves I check out on occasion.
Nice.
The Blumhouse one.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. It's interesting. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. On occasion, I like to listen to my friend Adam's film podcast called Filmwax Radio.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy both his speaking voice and his interview style, and he has some really interesting guests. So I'd say that one I listen to more than anything else, and I don't other than Shockwaves and Netflix, yours, which is cool. I've checked out a few times, not a lot, but again, I don't listen to podcasts a lot. I have the app here. I mean, I have this app, the podcast app. I really should check it out.
All right. All right. Well, thank you. Oh, all right. And then I guess last question here is the most memorable kill that you've got to work on.
Oh, okay. Let me think about that, because I don't have a lot of kills in any of my films. Let's see here. A Midnight Game. Memorable in what way? Like that like just sticks out, like production wise. Like,
yeah. I guess.
Okay. Well, I would definitely say it's like I did a lot of studying of like when I went in to shoot the scene where in the Midnight Game where Shelby Young gets hit by a car.
Nice. Okay.
I did a lot of research, and I like watched every car hit, all the the Final Destination one, the one in Meet Joe Black, and I studied them shot by shot, moment by moment. I wanted to see if I could one up those on a very low budget. And if you ever see the Midnight Game car hit where Shelby Young's character, she sees one of the characters, Jeff, and he's the doppelganger, and he's kind of cold, frozen looking, and she kind of takes a step back into the street and gets hit by an oncoming car. So I'd say it was that one.
Yeah.
And I remember it because it was a challenge in some ways, just to get it done with the amount of time we had and with the limited effects that we had available.
All right. Yeah, that's surprising you picked that one, because that one stood out to me most just from a viewer experience, because it's like a long shot of you just hear her body just get hit over, like like the tires. I'm like, whoa. I wasn't expecting you be the one that you mentioned.
Well, remember, I didn't write it. Yeah. So I was directing somebody else's writing, and my writing, I don't know. It's been a little bit lightweight compared to that. But yeah, I think that one, and that one's definitely the one that stands out for me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And any last words at all, or anything people can kind of hope for at all?
Well, I didn't. The one film we didn't talk about,
Missing Girl,
is Missing Girl, which is like the one oddball kind of non-horror, but film, but kind of is about the comic book shop owner. And that's kind of a film that's kind of near and dear to my heart, too. I loved working with Robert Longstreet, and that played at Toronto. And it's a film that's kind of gotten buried in many ways. It was on Hulu for about a year, but you really had to search for it. And so yeah, that was the only other one that we didn't kind of chat about.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, I watched that as well, and I was reading I think it was an interview on a website, and you mentioned like Ghost World and American Splendor were
totally.
Cool. All right, definitely check out all of A.D. Calvo's films. They're wonderful, especially Sweet Sweet.
You.
And thank you. You have a nice night.